Hello, everybody. Hi. How we all doing? Hello. Thank you, Salmon Moose. And folks, if you enjoyed those tunes, those were the dulcet tones of Slam House. Go check them out. Give them a subscribe. Why don't you? Just bring up the YouTube chat here. How are you all doing? We have so much to cover today and so little time to do it. We have, goodness sakes. Pop chat. Hey, Muhammad Naruto. Hey, Joanna Whitaker. All right. Got the YouTube chat up and running. Hello to Twitch chat. Hello, Fox of Fate. Hello, Salmon Moose. Oh my goodness, I can't imagine being able to take off the rest of the month. Oof. Can you imagine one day? Maybe I'll be a streamer who can do that. Take a little rest. Take a little snooze. Hey, Neuron. Hello. Trans Girl Jade. Hello, Lady Raincloud. Hello, Gamer G. Hello, Erica. You look really pretty today. Thank you. I do have disappointing news, though, and that is I got the belt dress, but the belt dress was not a quality dress. Unfortunately, the belts were incredibly cheap, and it was not designed with someone who has an ass as big as mine in mind. So I'm going to have to return that one. I was very, very sad. Do I think World War III will start next year? Nah, I don't think so. Here, gotta tweak this a little bit. Boom. Nailed it. A little longer. There we go. Thanks, Slam House. I feel that the problem of having one. Yeah. We need places that sell cute stuff like that with us big booty girls in mind. And big beauty girls. The high heel Converse? Hell yeah, let's go. Okay, folks, we have so much to cover and not so much time to cover it all. So we are going to be talking about Venezuela to kick off our show today. So that's right, folks. We've got Bavuzela content. Hey, VCC TV. Hello, Logano, and thank you very much for the compliment. I appreciate it. Lizzie Nepon, thank you for subscribing over on Twitch and for being subscribed for 21 months. That's 21 years in online streamer time. Hello. And yeah, we'll be talking about so many things. We've got I'm going to be giving you guys my review of Godzilla -1, and this comes from somebody who has seen literally every single Japanese Godzilla film. I've missed the last 2 American Godzilla movies, mostly because I don't have faith in American Godzilla movies. But I can give you my take as a media critic, someone who did that for, a decade. And I can also talk about the movie in the context of people seeming to think it's apolitical, which is, now having seen it, one of the biggest jokes I've ever seen in my life. Anyway, so we'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking about Lady Ballers, the Daily Wire. I guess I'm just gonna call it the Daily Wire hypocrisy. You know, the inherent conservative hypocrisy within the Daily Wire, and then we'll be getting into a 3-segment part going over, the expanded violence across all of Gaza. Israel is now officially, unofficially, it was saying, oh, we have safe zones that we're not going to bomb. Now they're bombing all of the things in the Gaza Strip. We'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking a little bit about the Jerusalem terror attack. We'll also be talking about the West Bank ethnic cleansing kind of campaign escalating. We've got a lot of stuff to cover today, and I've got about 3-ish hours to do it. So, yes. Starry Night, hello, and thank you for being in the last 7 streams. My goodness. Koopa Shell, what up? And yes, before we get started, folks, please hit the follow button on the stream. Share the stream on social media. I know that this is not usually the time that I'm streaming, so we're probably going to have a thin crowd today. I'm about 5 hours early. And so share it on socials. Hit the like button on the YouTube stream. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't. Hit the follow button if you haven't over on Twitch. And let's get going, because we have things to talk about. All right. Also, just how cool is this jacket? How cool is this jacket outfit? I think it's pretty cool. The goal was to have the belt kind of like pull in my boobs, but unfortunately my boobs are too big for the jacket, but it still looks really cute without the belt. Hello, Larzers. Have you missed anything? Wait, there's a jacket? Yeah, it's a leather jacket with like puff sleeves. I feel what my partner, when she saw it, compared it to an outfit a villain from Gem and the Holograms would wear. So I'm pretty happy with that comparison. Hello, Molotov. All right. Here we go. So, folks, there's a country. This country's name is Vuvuzela, okay? It's right here. It's on the tippy top South America. It's called Vuvuzela. You might have heard of it. We talk a lot about Vuvuzela in America. Mostly conservatives talk about it as like a place America should not emulate in any respect whatsoever, right? Right next to it, there's a country called Guyana. All right? So we've got Vuvuzela and the Guyana. They're right next to each other. Now, one thing to note about this relationship is that Vuvuzela has typically had some of the highest oil reserve, like largest oil reserves on the planet, some of the highest oil production on the planet. However, their economy has been terrible for a number of years due to a number of different reasons. One of the predominant ones being just colossal mismanagement, and basically making their economy like a one commodity thing. Typically, when we're talking about international, nation building, you don't want to you don't really want to build your entire economy on one resource. Because if something internationally happens, like another country, say, floods the market with said resource, your entire economy suddenly becomes relatively worthless. And that's bad, generally speaking, economically. Venezuela is one of those countries that has been hit very, very hard by building their economy predominantly on oil. This is a problem that also just completely tanked the economy of Yugoslavia. It's a common refrain throughout all of history. Yes, the Vuvuzela was a bit. It was a bit, guys. But then you have Venezuela. Now, Venezuela just hasn't really adapted its economy. Like, there have been attempts made over the years, but primarily it's still a one-resource economy. The difference that kind of sets it apart from countries that fell apart, like Yugoslavia, is that Venezuela has large enough oil reserves that even, like, with it being horribly mismanaged, even with economic downturns in regards to the price of oil, it can still manage to limp along, albeit not well. And that kind of becomes an issue when it comes to its relationship with Guyana. Now, Guyana, as you might notice, is much smaller than Venezuela, okay? Which also plays into a number of other factors. One thing to keep in mind about Venezuela is that Venezuela has a standing military of over 100,000. I believe it's close to 110 to 130,000, depending on if they call it reservists. Whereas Guyana has a military approximately the size of the high school I went to growing up. That is like 4,000-ish members of its military. Now, this is a problem primarily because of one spot. And it's a place in Guyana called Essequibo. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. However, the reason this area between Guyana and Venezuela is contested is largely due to colonialism. Surprise, surprise. Who could have guessed it would be colonialism? However, what the issue is here is that Essequibo used to be part of Venezuela when it was a colony. However, after the colonial period, international rulings led to Venezuela essentially ceding Essequibo to Guyana. It's largely a gigantic forest, rainforested region. It wasn't seen as being particularly valuable. To give you kind of you in the United States a point of reference, this is about the size of Florida right here. So when you know it, there have been a couple of things going on here regarding Essequibo and Venezuela and Guyana, which led to what just happened today. Venezuelans approve a referendum to claim sovereignty over a swath of neighboring Guyana. Essentially, Venezuela held a massive referendum to decide whether or not the country should just annex Essequibo. And the people who turned out to vote voted yes. However, there are some stories now being like, well, you know, a lot of people didn't turn out to vote. But I'm gonna tell you something, guys. That doesn't matter when it comes to a relatively authoritarian country like Venezuela. It doesn't matter that much if people stayed home to protest vote, because they still got primarily what they wanted. The Venezuelan government was able to get this referendum passed, which is what they are going to use as like a propagandistic tool to justify their annexation of Essequibo. So this is not great in terms of the stability of the region and, you know, not just invading other countries in South America. Now, there are a number of outlets reporting on this over the last several days. One of them being Daily Express, which is a news outlet based out of Trinidad. which, if you remember looking at the map here, you'll note Trinidad and Tobago very close to Venezuela, so they kind of have an ear on the ground in that respect. But the Venezuelan army sets up near border amid today's Essequibo vote. So basically, the Venezuelan army has it's not just like Venezuela's posturing in order to get what it wants politically at home. It appears that the Venezuelan military is taking steps to also potentially invade Guyana. On top of that, there are a number of other moves that are just kind of validating that other countries close and in the know, who have like a dog in the fight, as it were, are taking steps because they are expecting military action between Venezuela and Guyana. Notably, Brazil has called up its military to the northern border, basically to make sure there's not spillover into Brazil, and which would be another indicator for all of us that essentially Venezuela has very real and tangible plans towards trying to annex Essequibo, even if it means violence. Venezuela was dealing with horrible runaway inflation in the recent years. Yes, correct. That's largely because a lot of Venezuela's like social projects and like infrastructure projects, and basically everything in their economy was pegged to oil prices. And due to mismanagement, due to not diversifying their economy, their entire economy kind of got messed up by global oil prices, along with the fact that like the United States gives them a hard time. It's a combination of both of those things, as well as again, domestic mismanagement. But yeah, I mean, like even Guyana is like, yeah, there's a decent possibility here. Guyana will stay on alert after Venezuela vote on territorial dispute. So yeah, let's see here. This is according to their vice president, Bharat Jagdeo. And you might be wondering to yourselves, hey, why does this article talk about the potentially oil-rich Essequibo region? Well, as you might imagine, a country whose entire economy is predicated on oil production and large oil reserves kind of needs more and more oil in order to keep its economy running, at least long enough to potentially diversify into other natural resources, other commodity production. And it turns out that Guyana has basically been going through a modern day gold rush. Basically they've been discovering oil fields left and right. Like to the extent where like there is it is one of the most oil rich places on the planet, and it was just discovered like within the last couple of years. Yeah. Yeah, they are poised to become the world's fourth largest offshore oil producer, placing it ahead of Qatar, the United States, Mexico, and Norway. It is like economically could be huge for Guyana. And also something to note here, if I was wise enough to bring up the map, is that there are more and more of these discoveries. This is from this article is from May of this year. This article is from October of this year. Essentially, they are continuing to discover massive new oil reserves and oil fields basically every time they're looking at, could there be oil over there? Yep. Turns out, yep, there's a lot of oil around there. Um, let me just take a look here. Yeah, the Lancet Fish 2 well results mark the fourth offshore oil discovery in the country this year and brings the total number of discoveries from 2015 to date to 46 for more than 11 billion barrels of recoverable oil and gas. That is colossal. Yeah, and the 6.6 million acre block is expected to generate up to 1.2 million barrels of oil and gas per day by 2027, which is terrible for the environment, by the way. Don't get me wrong, but we're talking about in the short term, and also when it comes to a discovery like this. Guyana is not a wealthy country by any means. Like, the discovery that they are sitting on natural resources worth tens of billions of dollars at least is immeasurable. Like, the amount that they could do for their people with a discovery of this size is almost incalculable, you know? Which in turn makes it a very attractive target for Venezuela. And you might be thinking, well, maybe Venezuela will cave to kind of some third party. Some third party will come in and make a difference here. See if I can pull up the map here. Well, it turns out, no. Basically, as part of the referendum, the Venezuelan people, you know, again, most of whom stayed home, have rejected the International Criminal Court's jurisdiction to oversee the dispute with Guyana, basically rejecting a diplomatic solution to this, and just saying, either we're going to fight them and take it, or we're just going to take it. This is not ideal, to say the least. And let's see if we can find a map here of this. Yeah. So basically, by taking over, if you kind of compare this map to this one, they also take over the coastal territory of this area. They take over the coastal claims of Essequibo, which in turn would basically allow them to take a not insignificant amount of these offshore oil claims. You know, potentially like half of the offshore oil claims, along with any oil that might be potentially underneath Essequibo itself, which is, it seems very likely that there is an ungodly amount of oil underneath the Guianan soil as well. So, like, this is a war over not just, like, the land itself, but an incalculable amount of wealth buried under the waters of Essequibo as well as the land itself. Yeah, I by the way, I would expect that if you see you know, some ML tanky leftists talking about this, they're going to be doing some wild mental gymnastics in order to justify this act of aggression against Guyana. I'm guessing their argument is going to be something along the lines of, like, Venezuela has a right to its original borders before it was carved up by the, you know, the international interests. So yeah, I expect that, but I need you all to understand that primarily what this is about a massive oil rush that is happening within Guyana that Venezuela wants, and to an extent kind of needs to take in order to keep its economy limping along. Yeah, international interests, exactly, my rear end. You know how the tanky mind do. So Yes. It would not be surprising if I mean, I don't expect Guyana would be able to hold their territory by any means, but it would not surprise me if there was a short war between Venezuela and Guyana. I mean, keep in mind, like, the Venezuelan military fully mobilized is like, 20 times larger than Guyana's. Like, that those are not good odds for Guyana's military prospects. And to my knowledge, they don't have any like defensive agreements, so it's not like the United States would enter on Guyana's behalf. Um, yeah, so it's basically a gigantic mess, and I would expect that Venezuela is going to attempt this land grab. It's not quite like the situation I was describing last week when we were talking about Ethiopia, but where that conflict was less likely. This is looking both likely and imminent. So yeah, keep that in mind, and if you happen to be in South America, please keep safe. Do what you can to keep yourselves and your loved ones safe. But this conflict looks pretty imminent. All right. Also, my rear end, I did indeed see Godzilla -1. Yeah, exactly, Trans Girl Jade. There's not like a major like reason for them to not do it outside of, like, morally it being reprehensible. And Godzilla -1, easily the best film I've seen all year. Like, I would compare, I mean, just to kind of compare and contrast, should I try and watch it in theaters? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I tried to watch the Monarch show, and I just kept falling asleep. I fell asleep through almost 3 episodes of it. You will not be able to fall asleep while watching Godzilla -1. Which I guess we'll just talk about that next, huh? So, folks, there's this movie monster called Godzilla, and is basically this is going to be full-on spoiler review of Godzilla, okay? I'm doing a spoiler review of Godzilla. I'll tell you when the spoilers will start, but there will be spoilers, so I will give you a heads up when the spoilers are about to happen, okay? But basically, there's a movie monster called Godzilla. Movie came out in the 1950s. Made by Japanese directors. It's a whole iconic movie monster, one of the most famous movie monsters of all time. Famously represents, the horrors of nuclear war and like nuclear proliferation, and kind of a warning to humanity about, that the horror of that. Over time, this monster has kind of become more of like a campy hero type character rather than the destructive force of nature that it was originally kind of intended to be. It is the original is one of the best movies of the 1950s, certainly, but also just one of the best movies of all time. It is well made. And over time, though, like, basically became like a monster grudge match type thing where you'd have an actor in a Godzilla suit doing wrestling moves to fight an actor in like a gorilla suit, or some other crazy monster design. And those are very fun on their own, but they're fun in a very different way, and they're not necessarily good movies. They're just fun to watch, and basically that trend continued up until a movie called Godzilla Final Wars, where basically all of the fun movie monsters that they'd come up with over like the last, 50 plus years of making Godzilla movies all make an appearance in a gigantic battle royale type situation put together by aliens, because of course. And that was kind of it, right? Like that it kind of ended there. And then we had the American, I think 2014 Godzilla movie. And that kind of started its own trend of American movie Godzilla, which is much more in vein of kind of that campy type of fun, though it has kind of some pretentious, no, this is cinema elements to it. However, at the end of the day, you still have movies where it's like giant gorilla punches giant reptile that can breathe fire. And in response to kind of the initial American Godzilla, which to kind of put in perspective, America tried to make its own Godzilla movie in the year 2000, and it was terrible. Basically, most of the actors in it are voice actors from The Simpsons, which is, you know, delightful in its own way. 1998, my bad. I get it confused with Godzilla 2000 for whatever reason. But you basically have the voice cast of The Simpsons all cast as real people in the movie, and it's really bad, but in a fun way. It's directed by Ronald Emmerich, the guy who did Independence Day, so it's about as cheesy and corny as that, but now you have the actors from The Simpsons in it. And basically, ever since then, the production company behind Godzilla, Toho, has kind of had like a weird vendetta against American-made Godzilla films. So even though they licensed Godzilla for kind of this American production franchise in like 2014 or so, they didn't really feel great about it. And kind of the lackadaisical reception to the 2014 American Godzilla led them to greenlight an amazing movie called Shin Godzilla. Shin Godzilla is essentially kind of a retelling of the original Godzilla, except it's almost like eldritch, and it's less about the Godzilla monster itself, which is kind of a nice change of pace, because a lot of the Godzilla movies have historically been kind of about Godzilla and Godzilla's relationships with these other monsters, which isn't bad. But it's more of a spectacle film. You're there to see Godzilla blow stuff up in a fun and new way. However, Shin Godzilla is not about watching Godzilla blow stuff up, though that definitely happens. It's much more about the human response to kind of this ecological disaster. It was kind of born out of the Fukushima Daiichi situation where a massive tsunami damaged the nuclear power plant Fukushima and created a colossal nuclear natural disaster. And what's fun about Shin Godzilla is essentially this blob monster, this horrific blob monster emerges from the sea, mutated by like radiation, and it becomes like this weird, ever-changing thing that is being warped by kind of the forces of mankind itself into a monster that then wreaks havoc upon mankind. And it is incredibly good, and it's less about individual actors within the Japanese government, but more so about how different parts of the Japanese government kind of are able to put aside their differences and come together in order to address this completely unknown and unexpected threat. It's really good, and I would say you should absolutely see Shin Godzilla before you see Godzilla -1. It's not exactly necessary viewing. You will be able to understand everything that happens in Godzilla minus one if you haven't seen Shin Godzilla, but I think you'll get more out of Godzilla minus one if you have seen it, because it comes out of a very similar place as Shin Godzilla. Like there's a lot of thematic elements shared between the two films, and also Shin Godzilla is, I guess, kind of a blueprint for Godzilla minus one in a lot of different ways, and you'll see what I mean if you go and watch it. However, I just need to bring this up before we get into this. First of all, Godzilla minus one is one of the best reviewed movies of the year so far. 97% tomato meter, 98% audience reaction. And I just have to pause. There's an alt-right media YouTube channel called Nerdrotic. Their channel looks like this. It has a very, very, I guess, effective template for itself. Just there's a black Aragorn now. Oh no, Marvel movies are dying. Oh look, Captain Marvel. You all hate Captain Marvel, right? Captain Marvel's destroying everything you love and care about. So it's that kind of a channel, and also, of course, has people on like Melanie Mack, who is just the worst, and Sargon of Akkad, who is, again, a guy who couldn't get elected in the UK because of his comments about being okay with, having sex with a child. So, as well as like raping fellow members of parliament. So, just class acts on this show. Nerdrotic has almost 1 million subscribers. And yeah, he's not good at what he does. I will say that this is maybe one of the dumbest things I've ever seen anyone who pretends to be a movie critic say. The message divides. Good stories bring people together. And I have to say, this is incredibly stupid because the messaging of Godzilla minus one is expressly political. It takes place in the aftermath of World War II and talks about, basically people living in the rubble of American war crimes and how they're putting their lives back together and how they are now faced with this unimaginable threat for which they are not prepared, for which they are not, capable of responding to even. And the idea that these relationships and the power dynamics at play and the express messaging of the movie, like there are points where characters look into the camera and all but outright say exactly what the point of the movie is. And I can't imagine being so brain dead that you walk into this movie and just come away being like, huh, giant lizard, cool. Giant lizard laser, cool. Like that's what a lot of conservatives are taking away from this movie. That and like family values, even though the family values shown in this movie are antithetical to like everything conservatives talk about when they talk about family values. It's actually quite insane. So that being said, what can I say about this without getting into spoilers? Essentially, it's a movie about a guy, and in fact, like everyone in the movie is kind of in the same boat as this guy, who has survived the fires of war and who feels like he shouldn't have. And the same is true of almost everybody else in the film. And he struggles with that feeling throughout the movie. And the movie is in fact kind of like an argument for living, which is I think incredibly profound and beautiful, and was actually very, very moving in the theater. I heard some concern that this movie might do weird erasure of how bad Japan was in World War II, like portraying Japan as a small being who has anxiety and did nothing wrong ever. No, I don't think the movie does that. I think it's just not the focus of the movie. Like, imagine you're a person on the ground. You're a Japanese soldier on the ground during World War II, and you've never seen combat. And like, but you're given the order to like go and die. Like, that's the extent to which the movie kind of like deals with that. But it's not a movie about like the rape of Nanking. It's not a movie about Japanese imperialism. It's a movie about people who are just trying to survive when the only homes they've ever known, and when they come back to them, are smoking ruins. You know, they're people who are predominantly civilians, predominantly like, you know, dudes who like come back from the war and are like fucked up. But they're not, again, the characters in the movie aren't like, oh, you're the people who did the Bataan Death March. You know, they're not the war criminals of Japan. And again, not all Japanese soldiers were war criminals. Like that's kind of the thing, right? We're given a very deliberate, small on the ground perspective, you know? I haven't seen the director's previous work. But it could be that, again, and I honestly I don't necessarily blame artists in Japan for wanting to focus on, you know, the generational kind of trauma of like American fire bombings and like the nuking of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I don't blame them for focusing on that. The same way I don't necessarily blame, like, I don't know, Germans for, you know, dealing with All Quiet on the Western Front or something like that, you know? Does that make sense? I did not, at least let me put it this way, I did not walk away from the movie being like, ah yes, this movie did apologia for Japanese war crimes. You know? At no point in the movie does it like touch on that. At no point in and honestly, like my thing is that it doesn't go hard enough pointing the finger at America for the atrocities America did on Japan. That was my concern walking away from it, which is that like there is very little blame placed on America for, you know, the firebombing of like, you know, of Japan, like that killed hundreds of thousands of civilians. And there are characters who have lost like their entire families due to this firebombing campaign against civilians. But like they're never like, yeah, the Americans killed my family. No, instead they're mostly pointing the finger at each other. Or, you know, just talking about it as if it's just, you know, as if it's as, you know, you're better off blaming a mountain for causing a rock slide, you know? That's kind of like the thing, right? And I would say that like I would say that there is a degree of like Japanese nationalism in it, but I think that's almost unavoidable when you're talking about, you know, rebuilding a country from literal ashes. I think there is like a certain amount of pride and camaraderie that happens with that. So like I don't necessarily blame the movie for like having a bit of nationalism in it. I don't necessarily blame the movie for anything in it. I actually think it's like a 10 out of 10 movie for me. But I think it's a worthwhile question to ask. Like does the movie kind of whitewash like historical crimes? And the answer to me is no. Um, but I will say that Godzilla, as portrayed in this movie, is terrifying. Um, and in a different way than from the original Godzilla or from Shin Godzilla. I think each of these three movies has a different type of fear associated with it. The Godzilla in the original, I think, is largely like I mean, it's not. I mean, they're all allegorical fears, but I think like that's kind of the predominant embodiment of the fear in that movie is like understanding that allegory. Even if you don't understand the concept of allegory, I think there is something deeply traumatic and horrifying about Shin Godzilla, both in design and execution. But then you have the Godzilla in Godzilla Minus One, and it is much more like you are alone by a campfire at night in the woods, and you are aware that you're in a region that's full of tigers. And all of a sudden one of those tigers attacks you. That's the kind of fear that Godzilla Minus One has. Godzilla is much faster, much more visceral than I've seen him in any movie ever. And it is much more of a movie where the government fails, all of the stopgap measures that are supposed to prevent or support. Uh-oh. Hello? God damn it. Hello? You're still here? Did you lose me? No? Okay. Both my monitors just suddenly went black. Okay, but they're back on. Cool. Yeah, so it's a movie about like this raw, uncaged, animalistic force of nature, as opposed to like, a coming thunderstorm. It is just the sudden annihilation. And I think in that respect, it much more closely embodies like the feeling of nuclear annihilation, the feeling of going about your business and all of a sudden the sky begins raining fire, from American planes. I feel like it is much more in line with that. And it is incredibly well executed. and with that, I think I don't think I can say much more without spoilers, other than this is definitely a movie you should see in theaters. This is definitely a movie you should see in theaters. Biggest screen available to you. All right, from here on, we're going into spoilers. If you want to mute the stream, I'll give you guys a thumbs up when I'm done, and you can unmute. All right. So I'm gonna start the spoiler rundown in 10, 9. Wait, hold on. When you say visceral, wait, ask the question. Do you mean like a Saw movie? No, I don't mean like a Saw movie. I mean, there are moments of like blood, but there's not like gore or anything like that. All right, I'm going to be doing spoilers in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So essentially, this movie takes place slightly overlapping World War II, right? You have this young pilot who has been drafted into the Imperial, military of Imperial Japan. The Japanese government knows that it's losing. However, it has ordered its pilots onto the fateful kamikaze missions. So essentially, this young pilot who has been through military training and expected to go like fight, American fighter pilots, is now being told to essentially just dive bomb into American warships. And on the day he is slated to do that, he chickens out and decides instead he is going to fake that his aircraft had some kind of mechanical failure. So he lands on the battle-scarred island of Odo. And the mechanics there are like, listen, dude, we understand. Like, we are losing this war, and like, we also know that there's nothing wrong with your plane. But he feels deep amounts of shame and self-loathing in his failure to follow his fellow pilots, And that night, they're all eating together, and just all of a sudden, out of the depths of the ocean, Godzilla happens. And like, it's clearly not the Godzilla we're all familiar with. Like, it's a young or like unmutated Godzilla, but it's still, the size of, a T-Rex and a half. It's tall, huge, and can still tank gunfire really well. And it massacres the mechanics on Odo Island, and there's only 2 survivors, one being our kamikaze pilot, and then the other being the lead engineer on the island, who then directly blames the kamikaze pilot for not running and shooting it with the 20mm cannon that's attached to his fighter plane. So he then like throws all of the pictures of the mechanics' families at this kid, and blames him all for all of their deaths before kind of vanishing into the ether. And then this pilot returns home to return to his parents, and the entire area in which he lived is just a smoldering ruin. his parents are both dead in the firebombing. His neighbor lost like her husband and all three of her kids in the firebombing, and she realizes that he was a kamikaze pilot and he didn't sacrifice his life, and she holds him directly responsible for her children dying. And like this is just I don't understand how you can watch the opening 15 to 20 minutes of this movie and be like, oh yeah, it's totally apolitical, bro. Like, it's literally about living in the aftermath of this global conflict and the interpersonal relationships and like coping mechanisms that everyone is using to try and survive in the aftermath of this political turmoil. And basically he builds himself like a little shack out of like his parents' old house and tries to figure out what to do with his life. And he winds up encountering just kind of this vagrant young woman who has a baby, and she follows him home and is just like, and she's kind of like a scoundrel, like she's been stealing in order to feed herself and the baby. And he's just like, yeah, sure, whatever, you guys can live here, and this winds up becoming like the heart of the movie, like these unexpected and improbable family dynamics developing in the aftermath of complete obliteration, and like I think that's probably what like a lot of conservatives gravitate towards. Like, oh, it's a movie about family, it's a family picture. But like ultimately, while that is true, like the family dynamics that are being put in place are dynamics that conservatives fundamentally reject. Like, oh, you've just been living with this unwed woman. How scandalous. Oh, and it turns out the baby's not even her baby. Ugh, disgusting. Like there's just a lot of different layers to it being this kind of construction of found family. And this young man winds up getting a job minesweeping. And because there's tons of mines littered in the waters around Japan at this time. And this is like as close as the movie gets to talking about how like America being like to blame for any of this destruction, because the boat he's expected to go minesweeping in is like a shitty wooden boat. And he got hired under the assumption that this is going to be like a well defended boat designed for minesweeping, but it turns out the boat is specifically designed around keeping it safe from American mines, because American mines are magnetic, because it's a wooden boat, so it's able to not attract those mines. And he kind of becomes like part of this boat crew, and throughout the movie, they kind of become part of his family as well. Like they become, the doting uncles and grandpas of his family, and it's really beautiful and lovely. But then they kind of, while they're doing this minesweeping, they stumble into what is being hidden from them by the general public. Right? Or not by the general public. It's being hidden from the general public, but essentially the United States and the Japanese government are aware that there is basically this gigantic creature that's been sinking or disabling boats and ships across the Pacific Ocean, and they kind of get sent to try and buy time for this warship to show up that will be like better equipped to kind of handle whatever this is. And turns out it's Godzilla. And destruction and mayhem ensue that further scar this kamikaze pilot. And this is now like a year or two after the end of World War II. And it just winds up being this kind of this ongoing back and forth that the movie's having with itself about, you know, the decision to continue living and kind of the implications of that, the risks of doing that, the pain of doing that. And it winds up being one of the most compelling human stories I've seen play out in a Godzilla movie. Because typically it's less about the human beings in Godzilla movies and more about either systems, which is perfectly exemplified in Shin Godzilla, or it's like merely a vehicle for kind of the larger allegory. And like the story kind of takes a back seat. Or it's just a vehicle for special effects, which is the vast majority of Godzilla movies. But there's just something real about that discussion, especially like, you know, I'm getting older, and like I can see that. Like I can see kind of this debate on the screen being echoed like inside my heart, you know, especially as somebody who struggles with like chronic depression, you know, where it's more of an open question. I think it's less easily settled in people like myself. Like, is going on, is perpetuating myself, is that good? Should I be doing that? And I mean, I'm not gonna go through the entire movie, but it's ultimately this movie that is about both personal and national mistakes coming back to haunt you, and then being able to make the decision to overcome them and move forward. And like the answer the movie gives and finally is that yes, you continue moving forward, you continue to live despite all these obstacles, despite everything, because ultimately it is worth it. Ultimately, there is, even if you lose everything, even if you lose absolutely everything and everyone you love, you can still find family. You can still find hope and love and reasons to keep living. You know, there's a scene in Hayao Miyazaki's one of my favorite movies of all time, Princess Mononoke, where there's a scene where the main character interacts with a leper colony, and one of them talks about how like life is pain and suffering, but still you find reasons to keep on living. And I feel like Godzilla Minus One is an unlikely but incredibly effective vehicle for a message along those lines as well. So spoiler section over. This movie made me feel a lot of feelings. This movie made me feel like, just on a like both like on its own as a film, but also for myself, you know, like there's an element to it that just hit my heart, and it's hard to really articulate it, you know? But I mean, I guess I'm gonna get a little personal. Uh, sorry, but when I was a kid, right? When I was like 5 years old, um, my dad would do a lot of work. My dad made ads, like he was an advertising director, um, and he he would go away on business trips, right? And I remember that there was this one time. There's this one time he came back from one of his business trips, and he brought a VHS tape back with him, and it was Godzilla versus King Kong. And I remember watching it and just being like amazed. And of course, it does not hold up. It doesn't hold up at all. Like it's incredibly racist. I don't recommend showing it to a small child. Um, I don't really recommend showing it to many people. It's they do blackface. It's bad. It's bad stuff. Um, maybe watch it with somebody who's like 10 or 11 or 12, and like an age where you can properly contextualize the racism. And like Godzilla just kind of became a thing where I would go and watch Godzilla movies with my dad. Like it became like a family thing, right? And that stayed true right up until I came out to him as trans. And that like kind of ended my relationship with Godzilla movies, which earlier I gave kind of like a timeline of how like the Japanese Godzillas kind of ended with Godzilla Final Wars, but then were triggered by the 2014 Godzilla to start making new movies. And we never watched Shin Godzilla together, but like I just hadn't been able to really watch them without my dad. And there was just something really special seeing Godzilla -1, especially now that I'm out as myself. I'm out as a trans woman, and like being able to enjoy this again without him, you know? And there's also just something very sad about that, but being able to find this enjoyment and love of this thing, this franchise, which maybe that's cringe or whatever. I get it. Um, it resonated with me, especially as somebody who, like, after I came out to my dad, I had to make the decision to continue living, and it was not an easy, cut and dry decision for me. Like it was the closest I ever got to like going out into the garage and just turning on the car. And that seeing Godzilla -1 in theaters just like really tapped into that specific thing for me. So, um weirdly, in a movie for that is about and has so much destruction in it, the movie is primarily about hope and moving forward, and um finding it within yourself to be able to do both those things. And it is incredibly beautiful. So yeah, 10 out of 10. You all should go see Godzilla -1. Did your screening include the trailer for The Boy and the Heron? It did. But I've also been watching those trailers like the second they come out. So it wasn't new to me, but it was cool to see on the big screen. Glad you're still here, Jack. You're beautiful, beautiful person. Oh, goodness. Sorry. Make everyone's lives better for having you in them in some way, shape, or form. I appreciate that, trans girl Jade. You know, like, coming out as a trans woman did alleviate a lot of my depressive symptoms. But it didn't get rid of my chronic depression entirely, you know. It's less acute than it used to be. You know, I'm not doing like the suicidal ideation like every day, like that grind. But you know, still sometimes there are still really hard days. And where I have to make that choice. And it's I'm glad that I'm doing something that makes your lives better. That was hard to talk about. Feel like you learn how to be a depressed person and you have to unlearn a lot of behaviors also. Yeah, like that's the thing, right? Like I have chronic depression and chronic anxiety issues, like especially around like socializing and social gatherings. And like coming out put me in a much better environment that didn't facilitate wallowing in the chronic depression and wallowing in the anxiety. And like those things got better for me, but it doesn't make the fundamental problem go away, you know? No longer having to live a double life, incredibly helpful for alleviating a lot of the symptoms, but it doesn't like fix the fundamental like issue in my brain, you know? Hey, Christina Amazon. So, yeah. Bakul, is my stream bugging or are you hurting my eyes on purpose? I don't know what you're talking about. Unless you're trying to pay me a compliment. I hope I'm not like flashing on your screens. My computer has like done like a black screen on me a couple of times. But you guys don't seem to have been affected by that, so I'm just gonna keep on going. Hey, Spitfire, thank you. All right, after that review, I'm going to just do my little spiel here. Folks, if you've been enjoying the stream, hit the follow button on Twitch, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, and please, please, please consider hitting the like button on the stream as well. And folks, please also consider dropping some subs or donos because those are primarily what allow me to live and make this show possible. So far, we've had one subscribe. Lizzie Nepon, thank you very much over on Twitch. But if any of you would like to help me continue making the show possible, consider dropping some subs or donos. With that, we are going to move on. It's 5 o'clock. All right. We're going to talk a little bit about the Daily Wire movie.
I don't have much oil, so you'll have to accept a mild rub down BWABUWU.
Boo-woo. Salmon Moose, thank you for the 5 gifted tier 1 subs. I certainly appreciate it very, very much. Thank you. Thank you, thank you.
Love.
Aw. Matt, that's Yahoo. Thank you for gifting Koopa Shell a sub. Hello, Snoogan. Yeah, you guys are what make my streams and my videos possible. Also, sorry for the delay in getting new videos up on YouTube. It's mostly just I've been very interpersonally busy and haven't had the time to just sit down and schedule and crank out all those videos. Many of them are already cut up, but yeah. Got here just in time for an offer of a mild rub down. Things are looking up already. Hell yeah. Is it the monitor going black for a second when you move? No. It's probably because I've had this the computer needs to be like restarted or something. It's been like sleeping for a bit, and usually I turn it off and it runs just fine. It's also likely that I need to like reinstall the drivers because it's probably having a similar problem to what my other computer was experiencing. So I'll figure all that out. All right, folks, it's time. I'm sure many other channels have covered this. I have not, mostly because I didn't feel like I had much interesting to say about it. But hey, we are going to be talking about Lady Ballers and kind of the failure of the Daily Wire and basically kind of the fundamental flaw in conservative messaging and propaganda. So without further ado, let's hop right into it, shall we? Now, I haven't actually watched the trailer for Lady Ballers. So I'm going to do that right now. We're going to have a little react to it. I'm sure it's very transphobic, but spoiler, I have seen 1 minute of the movie that is not the trailer. It was put out by one of Daily Wire's like partners. I think on Twitter they go by DC Drano. So I've gone over that clip already, just personally, but I haven't seen the trailer, and we'll be going over that clip again today. It's very bizarre. It's very bizarre, but here we go. Lady Ballers, Daily Wire Plus original. I don't really know what to expect other than it's probably going to be... Judging from the 1 minute clip I've seen prior to this is going to be weirdly both offensive but mostly non-offensive. Like they don't actually have the balls to commit to being offensive. So instead it's just kind of this flaccid attempt at comedy, but nobody's laughing.
Guys, this is serious. Sports can be your pathway to a better life.
Well, like yours?
Are you gonna move?
I am not.
If you can beat them.
Coach? Alex, we could play basketball.
We'd have to get the whole team back together.
We're in.
I'm in.
I'm in.
Join them.
This is the way the world is now. My 8-year-old daughter told me all about it.
A guy can become a girl with no physical changes at all.
That's called gender fluid.
So I can be a woman on the court and a man in the bedroom. I can't believe it. Nice!
You mean when you're sleeping?
Yes.
It's time
I'm with her.
to play
You need my truth. This is my truth.
like a girl.
We could dominate every woman's sport. Running, swimming, soccer.
I said sport, Felix.
Lady Ballers, streaming exclusively on Daily Wire Plus.
Okay, I have a few questions here just from the trailer alone, right? So we're just gonna go through this real quick. Like the setup here is ostensibly like, oh yes, it's wrestling. Yeah, they had to let in a dude to wrestle this much smaller lady. Ha 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 ha. Except you have co-ed wrestling. They just do it by weight class. Like they don't match up. Like this is already a thing that happens, but they don't match up people of different weight classes against each other, generally speaking. So that's this is weirdly silly, but not in the way that they intended it to be. Also, again, like the Global Games US Open, if they did have wrestling like this, again, would match via weight class. But moving past that, it is weird that like the fundamental opening message of this movie is like, oh, this main character's life sucks. Therefore, he's going to recapture the glory days of his youth by getting his old high school basketball team back together to play against high school girls. Like, even bad 90s comedies would have a better premise than that, you know? Like, maybe that could be like a funny premise if you like had it like that, but like they don't even execute it well. Like, here's what I'm talking about, right? So why in this meeting are they like, I mean, it looks like they're in like I guess maybe a locker room. But why are they still wearing their wigs? Like, what? They're clearly in private here. Like, they aren't unless they're continuing to identify as women. In which case, like, that is kind of interesting to me that the Daily Wire would write a movie about that's oddly sympathetic in that way to trans people, but I know that's not their intention at all, right? They just didn't think through scenes like this, you know? And on top of that, like, are they trying to do high school sports? But also, just there's an 8-year-old girl here explaining gender to this group of dudes, right? And the Daily Wire is against, like, I don't know, putting sexuality in front of kids. You know, that's kind of like their whole thing, is like saying that they're against that, right? And literally, this is a scene from the trailer.
So I can be a woman on the court and a man in the bedroom. I can't believe it. Nice!
You mean when you're sleeping?
Like he's talking about like sex in front of this 8-year-old child. Like, it's totally fine to talk about sex in front of a kid, according to this movie, I guess. Right? Because, like, the point of the movie here is to show, like, these are the types of conservative men who would get involved. Nah, not conservative men. But, like, these are the types of men who would get involved with this. But, like, you're the ones making the movie, right? Like, if conservatives had an actual example of something like this happening, they would use it all the time, right? They would use it all the time. Like, again, they're talking in front of this 8-year-old girl, and in the conservative movie that they have made, the guy's initial response to that is, sweet, so I can pretend to be a lady, but still bang chicks in the bedroom. High five. And that's just a weird joke, both for a conservative movie to make, from an outlet that ostensibly says, you know, putting sexuality in front of kids is bad. Yeah, even this trailer is just internally contradicting itself. Also, the Surfs, thank you so much for the raid. Welcome, Raiders. My name's Riverboat Jack. I'm a trans woman, and I'm going into Lady Ballers sight unseen. We're going through this trailer. and we'll be going through a lot of other things about it soon here. But welcome, y'all. Please hit the follow button, make yourselves comfy, and I hope you have a good time here.
You mean when you're sleeping?
Yes.
It's time
I'm with her.
to play
Like, wait, I'm with her. Like, okay, wait. I'm with her. That's from almost 10 years ago. Like, it's I'm with her was like a fringe 2016 slogan for Hillary Clinton's campaign. And that's 7 years ago now. Like, I feel like that's on par with like someone trying to make a what's up joke, except more people would get it if it was what's up. They'll never let it go. It's so bizarre.
like a girl.
We could dominate every woman's sport. Running.
I also just love that, like, the messaging of this movie that conservatives are trying to put out there is women are just inferior to men. like who is this movie for? Like, even like half of your conservative audience that's gonna watch this is still gonna be like, man, I hate this.
Swimming. Soccer. I said sport, Felix.
Lady Ballers, streaming exclusively on Daily Wire Plus.
I just there's so many elements to it. Yeah, we've got to get the high school gang back together to compete against ladies for an easy victory. I don't even know, dude. Like, even the movies that they're trying to parody here, like A League of Their Own, like, I don't know, dude. It's so weird. It doesn't even hit the mark that they're aiming for. And this is just in the trailer. So let's take a couple looks at some other stuff. Just a quick note here. Matt Walsh has called for Lizzo to be jailed for having drag queens at a show in Tennessee. You know, just to remind you guys how, like, deeply the people on the Daily Wire hate men in drag. Like, Matt Walsh has literally called for people to be jailed over this, and he just today retweeted this. Like, what's the hottest that someone has ever looked in a movie? Like, he's in a movie whose central premise is men essentially doing drag in order to win at sports, right? But I guess it's okay when he and his friends do it. You know, he doesn't have to go to jail. Jeremy Boring doesn't have to go to jail, I guess. But if Lizzo does it, well, jail for everyone. And, like, I mean, like, here's a video. We're not going to watch all of it, but drag queens are infiltrating the church. Yeah, bro. Who's putting them there? Who's doing the conservative push for drag queens in churches now? Because it seems to be like you made an entire movie about that. Literally the opening scene, just with a colossal cock bulge. Their whole argument against trans women existing is that cis men are predators and will take advantage. Yeah. Like, I guess I guess Matt Walsh and his friends are the predators who will take advantage. And you might be like, well, Jack, that's just not fair. That's just not fair of you. Here's Matt Walsh from earlier today. This is what sets the Daily Wire apart from any other conservative media company. We wanted to make a sports comedy mocking the trans insanity. We couldn't find enough actors brave enough to star in the film, so we just played the characters ourselves. Just that fact alone is funny as anything in the film. Like, people didn't want to, like, were so against working with them. They had to. Yeah, guys, this is what bravery looks like. Okay, this is bravery right here. Matt Walsh bravely stepping up to do the drag that he called on Tennessee to jail Lizzo for. So brave. So brave. God. Out of curiosity, I really want to know, where was Lady Ballers filmed? Interesting. Filming locations: Nashville, Tennessee, USA. I get the state's recent legal restrictions on drag. Huh. Does that mean? I mean, I'm wondering if someone could bring a criminal complaint against Matt Walsh. Chat, if any one of you is a lawyer, you have the opportunity to do the funniest thing possible right now. You have the funniest thing. You have the opportunity to do the funniest thing possible and try and help bring criminal charges against Matt Walsh and the Daily Wire for violating the sanctity of Tennessee's anti-drag laws. It's the only way you could ethically enforce those laws. Oh God. I don't. I hate everything, but let me find joy in the hypothetical possibility of bringing the Daily Wire into a legal fight with the state of Tennessee over their stupid transphobic movie. Like, it's not even like a good or like interesting transphobic movie. Like, here's a clip. Here's the clip I watched. Okay, this is the one clip I had watched prior to the trailer. Oh goodness. It's just
Oh, and Mary Margaret showed me her penis.
Some boy showed you his penis?
What? No, not a boy, Daddy. Gross. Mary Margaret, she's a girl.
Girls don't have penises, Winnie.
Mary Margaret does. Penises are weird.
Can we stop saying penis, please? Where did this happen, anyway?
In the bathroom.
Well, why are they letting boys...
Just want to note the pathetic product placement in this of the Johnny the Walrus stuffed plushie from Matt Walsh's weird anti-trans walrus children's book.
In the bathroom.
Well, why are they letting boys in the girls' bathroom?
Why do you keep misgendering Mary Margaret?
Misgendering? What are you talking about?
It's very transphobic of you.
How do you know the word transphobic?
I'm 8 years old.
Exactly, you're 8 years old.
Okay, boomer.
You know what? It's fine. We'll just have to get you into a private school. Some of them have good sports programs.
Private schools reinforce white patriarchal privilege.
Teach you that at public school, did they?
No. Mommy's boyfriend Chris told me. He's an ally.
Is he? We'll see about that.
Can I just say, it is incredibly funny to me that the Daily Wire, in their own comedy movie that they wrote themselves, wrote a scene where Jeremy Boring, the CEO of the Daily Wire, gets owned by an 8-year-old and has no counter argument. Like, they don't even like try and say that this 8-year-old girl is wrong. She just owns them. And like, the best, like, one of the weirdest parts, this is literally being promoted on Twitter by the Twitter account DC Drano, who is a Daily Wire partner. Like, this isn't like somebody clipped this in order to try and make the movie look bad. This is to bolster his argument here. This scene from Lady Ballers is both comical yet horrifying. 8-year-old daughter tells her dad about how a girl showed her penis in the girl's bathroom. This is the dystopian reality being pushed by dem groomers on kids. This is our line in the sand. Enforce it and fight back. And it's just like, but you guys wrote the scene. Why did you not write it with a counter argument in the scene? Like the response Jeremy Boring has here is just like, where did you learn that? How do you know the word transphobic? Well, I guess we'll put you in a private school. Your mom's boyfriend told you that? Like, even in the context of the movie, Jeremy Boring is a divorced loser. There's no, like, he doesn't provide a counter argument because they couldn't even think of one for the script of their movie. It's incredible how, like, tone deaf this entire movie must be. I haven't seen it. Maybe if you guys give me, like, subs and donos, I'll watch it for some godforsaken reason and do like a breakdown of the movie for you guys. But holy shit. The main thing is, and I really want to emphasize this, this is not a movie that's worth being upset about. It's mostly just a movie that's, like, inexplicable. I'm fascinated by the mystery of it. How many subs? For a combined 50 subs, if you guys wanted to make that a community goal. It's not worth it. That's the thing. It's probably just boring as shit. You know? Like, I my goodness. Hey, Paladin. But I really wanted to talk about this for a couple of different reasons. One, because it's very funny to me that by looking into this, I noticed that Ben Shapiro has redesigned the entire aesthetic of his channel. Now his videos are just titled Ben, which is it's very funny to me. Like, they've been testing out the aesthetic for a while, but they've been, like, going back and, like, adding videos to, like, you know, the aesthetic. You can see them back even just like a month ago. There's just, like, videos without really much of a thumbnail to them, and now it's just like everything's Ben, everything's coming up Ben, and I don't know. It's a weird redesign for him because it just doesn't look. It doesn't even look interesting. I can't even imagine anything less interesting than looking at what this guy has to say, you know? Oh shit. He did a Star Wars video with Critical Drinker. I really want to watch that, but we are on a tight schedule today. We'll watch this if we have time. But I just wanted to note the aesthetic change. And I know this clip has been going around a lot. Specifically, I think it's this one.
Streaming exclusively on Daily Wire Plus December 1st.
So that's the thing you did.
Yeah. We like to make friends.
So that happened.
Okay, so let's go back to the inception of this idea. So you approached me and you said we should make a fictional film about this topic. Now, to be fair, I think I'd actually suggested to the Crane Boys that they do this as a doc.
Yes.
I originally went to them and I said, you guys should like go try out for a bunch of ladies' leagues. And that became not possible because, as it turns out, most ladies' leagues don't allow in actual men. And they weren't willing to go the full distance in terms of what it would require in order to, you know, the actual hormone treatments and everything to play in some of the ladies' leagues. But in any case, it turned into this. So explain.
So I don't know. I don't know how this made it through the initial conversation here. And I definitely don't know how it made it through editing. But Ben Shapiro, you know, master of conservative rhetoric, literally just undermined the entire conservative argument when it comes to trans women in sports. The entire argument is that, you know, allowing trans women into sports will allow cis men to enter in and compete against, unfairly, cis women. And that there is, and furthermore, the conservative argument is that there's really no difference between cis men and trans women. And Ben Shapiro here just straight up says, yeah, we tried to do this initially as a documentary, but, you know, the filmmakers looked into it, and it turns out nobody they knew was willing to go through hormone replacement therapy to meet the standards of any of these women's leagues. And like, yeah, that's because the conservative argument has always been horseshit. The conservative argument has always been like, oh yeah, it's so easy, bro. Like girls are playing against guys. Guys are playing against girls. It's just you just say you identify as something else and they let you into the league, bro. And it's like that's not how it works, like in any type of league. Like if it's involving like post-pubescent people. Like once you're in like, you know, like 14, 15, 16, like you have to have been on hormone therapy to participate in the sports league of like the other you know, the gendered sports, the other gender of the sports league, right? This is like, I mean, I can't remember a time when someone shot their own argument in the foot so hard with like the reality of what it takes, of like what the real situation is. Right? Like Ben Shapiro's out there just being like, yeah, the reality is cis men don't want to go through hormone replacement therapy in order to prove a point about trans women in sports. They don't allow real men into women's leagues. Yeah. Funny that, isn't it? I mean, like, it's on par with this legendary moment from the Joe Rogan show, right? I mean, like, you guys probably remember this, but it's literally this moment, but on an even larger scale, because someone produced a movie that presumably cost millions of dollars to make.
People have had this. Millions of kids have been on hormone blockers, really?
My guess is that we're into the millions now. Depends on what. I don't think we have exact numbers, but it's if we're talking all this stuff year over year. So it's the drugs. I mean,
but you should progress. You're an adult. This is a free.
Yeah, they will be. And I also.
You're talking about hormone blockers.
Yeah. I mean, I would guess, you know, hundreds of thousands at this, but I could be wrong.
Goes from millions to hundreds of thousands.
Million sounds great.
Yeah, I could be wrong.
Yeah.
The media matters on the phone with that clip.
Yeah.
Matt Walsh claims that 2008 and 2015, it's a massive increase, and over 1,000 girls had gender affirming double mastectomies.
over the last 5 years, there were at least 4,780 adolescents. That's over 5 years, so slightly over 1,000 adolescents per year. And he's saying there's hundreds of thousands, millions of children going through this. Like, we haven't seen like an embarrassment like this interaction here since Matt Walsh went on this. But again, I have to point out, there's not a multi-million-dollar movie predicated on what Matt Walsh is saying here. You know? It's wild, dog. It's yeah, none of us cis guys. Yeah, it turns out none of us cis guys wanted to inject ourselves with testosterone blockers and estrogen to see what happens, because it turns out most conservative cis dudes have some vague idea. You know, they might not believe the science when it comes to vaccines, but they have some vague idea that if they blocked the testosterone in their body and had estrogen instead, that they might have some bodily changes happen. You know, it turns out if they went into Biden's feminization camps, they might not come out the same way they went in. Okay, I'm just keeping it real with you guys. Conservatives know on an intuitive level that their argument against trans people is horse shit. They just continue to make the same horseshit argument and repeating it over and over and over to themselves until they believe it. That's kind of the secret, right? That's kind of the secret of big conservative lies. Just repeat it ad nauseum until it sounds like common sense, even if it flies in the face of every material reality that you encounter. As I recall, even that over 4,000 number is inflated because it's mostly 18 to 19-year-olds and it's not at all just trans boys. True. Yeah, it turns out the reality is hard to ignore. Hey, Purple Dragon guy. Yeah, it turns out, even if you even if you took the hormones out of it, even if you were like, hey, random cis dude, would you like to have breast implants? We'll give you a bunch of money to do it. Most dudes are still not going to say yes to just even like removable breast implants. There's like the one story about a guy who did it on a dare, and it's actually a pretty interesting like rabbit hole to go down, because it seems like he got like a broader perspective on like the world by doing it. But these people are too no. They know that they don't want to do something like that to themselves or their bodies, because they know that there's fundamentally a difference between a trans woman's body and a cis man's body. They know that. I'll still take the money, though. Sounds like an interesting story. Yeah, maybe we'll go down it sometime. I didn't prep it for today, and we do have a lot to talk about today. But just to really hammer it all home, Ben Shapiro knows he's full of shit. Jeremy Boring knows he's full of shit. Matt Walsh knows he's full of shit. None of these people, by the way, believe that they're full of shit. But the fact that Ben Shapiro is able to say, without any sense of self-awareness, that yeah, we tried to make this a documentary, but it turns out our ridiculous conception of the world isn't backed up by any material reality. He's able to say that with a straight face just because he believes otherwise. You know? Did I cover the Venezuela situation? I did indeed. We talked about Venezuela and Guyana already. But yeah, it's a strange situation, but I think it really highlights the mental dissonance that many conservatives have to live with in order to hold their political positions. And there we go. End of segment. How we all doing? Folks? Just want to say a big thank you to Snow Allen, Counter Dragoon, Canceling Culture, and William Knights for hitting the follow button over on Twitch. And folks, we've been going for about 2 hours now. If you've been enjoying the show or getting any interesting info out of this, please hit the follow button on Twitch, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, hit the like button on the YouTube stream, and consider dropping some subs or donos, because this show is brought to you by viewers like you. And without you guys doing subs and donos, I do not make the ad revenue to actually do this for a living. So continue to drop some subs or donos, because those are what keep this show going. Thank you. That other Ted, thank you all for hitting the follow button as well. Yeah, I mean, it is very impressive how in like 2 to 3 sentences, Ben Shapiro destroyed like the entire premise of like, I don't know, 60% of like Daily Wire's content. Like it's the foundational premise behind the entire conservative push to limit trans rights. Remember, like the wedge issue they used was trans women in cis women's sports, you know, or trans women in women's sports rather. Very, very impressive. Okay. I do out of perverse curiosity, before we get to talking about Israel and Gaza, Jerusalem, and West Bank, we are gonna do this real quick, mostly because I have a perverse need to do so. I have a perverse need to do this. All right, it's time. We're going to be talking about a YouTube channel called Yellow Flash 2, which, despite the name, has 430,000 subscribers. And as a little just preview here, they are really upset that in a recent comic book, it was revealed that Nightcrawler is the love child of 2 ladies, Mystique and this other lady. And I have to know what this guy who thinks a person who can shapeshift into anyone thinks that this is a joke. I need to know. I need to know. I need to know. This is my own perverse desire.
Today we're going to talk about the state of the comic book industry and what you can buy if you decide to jump into comics. But let's look at things such as the overall state of the industry. Comixology, a well-known app that people could go and read their digital comics on, which was, by the way, a horrible app. It never really ran that well. But
I don't follow comic book YouTube. But I do know that the Yellow Flash is a bad guy, so I don't know. Weird, like naming your channel Darkside.
It was a dedicated app for comic books to come out on. Well, that's been shut down. It's all on Kindle now. I'm not really mourning the loss of Comixology because it was a garbage app, but it's still another example of comics getting the sideline because everything's just rolled into Kindle now. So, and other stuff. It's not comic book store data. That is American made. There, pretty much Japanese. The Japanese have taken over the comic book industry in America. And that's
what? It's really bizarre to me that he's talking about this with an article that is headlined by like the Calvin and Hobbes artist's latest book. Anyway.
Marvel and DC's fault because they're constantly doing shit like this all the time. So they've retconned Nightcrawler. Now, if you were to go to Google and say, who is Nightcrawler's father, you'll get Azazel. The man who has been his father for some years now. He has been retconned out. No longer is Azazel the father of Nightcrawler. And he sure does look like Nightcrawler, doesn't he? Well, that's been explained in the new retcon. So now Nightcrawler is the son of Mystique and Destiny.
Cool.
2 women. Mystique became a...
Mystique and Destiny, 2 women. Are you sure? I thought they were talking about the streamer.
Man, because she can shapeshift. And I feel like this is a question that
what is okay? What is your issue though? Wait.
And Destiny, 2 women. Mystique became a man because she can shapeshift, and I feel like this is a question that Brody from Mallrats would have loved. Can Mystique become a man and have the workings of a man? Well, apparently,
yes. What? At no point in the comics is it shown that like her changing form is like an illusion. It's just how she's able to do that to her body. Mystique is, I guess, technically her like the father. So, yeah. I mean, it's not complicated, guys. Like, Mystique impregnated Destiny, and Destiny had Kurt, Nightcrawler. It's not... Mystique can shapeshift a dick? Yeah, honestly, Matatiahu, that seems to be the fundamental disconnect here for conservative comic book fans. Also, I just have to point out the irony of, like, Soy crying over the fact that, like, two of the X-Men had a lesbian relationship, and then they had a kid. That's impossible. Ignore the fact that, like, the X-Men have for the longest time been, like, one of the go-to, like, hey, this is actually about civil rights for African Americans. Hey, this is actually about civil rights for gay people. Like, oh wow. They're really breaking new ground here.
She does. So, Azazel, you're out of here. This is like every X-Men comic now.
Is it?
Everybody is LBGT in X-Men comics now. It's funny that it's Nightcrawler too, because Nightcrawler at least was a hardcore Catholic. That appears to not be a thing anymore.
Ariana Jasmine, thank you very much for the raid. And lovely Angelique, thank you very much for subscribing over on Twitch. I do have to point this out though. Like, Kurt's supposed to be Catholic. The Pope's Catholic, so that just means that just means like, obviously he wouldn't have gay moms. No Catholic has ever had gay parents before. It's not like the Pope is out here saying gay couples can be blessed. Like, what are you talking about? Yellow Flash 2?
I'm not sure. I haven't been following it as closely, but it seems like they got rid of his love of Christ a while ago. I don't think he's as religious as he used to be, and that's of course thanks to modern Marvel comics. But Azazel's out, and the reason
I think people realized that it was kind of cringe to have Kurt be so Catholic when he, in the cartoon, was able to convert Wolverine from Judaism to Catholicism. Yeah, that was a weird episode of the original X-Men animated show.
That they're saying he's still kind of looks like Azazel is because when she became a man, for some reason, parts of him were on her palate. That's what she says, and the shades of Azazel kind of moved in on him, and that's why he looks like Azazel. The reason that they are legitimizing this is because apparently, according to John Byrne, Chris Claremont, and I'm guessing this is likely true, originally intended for this to be a thing, but editorial says no. So they decided, well, we're going to change it now, and in this comic, we're going to make it official that here they are.
Yeah. For those of you wondering what I'm talking about, the video's unavailable. Damn. Okay. Well, I probably can't show it anyway because of copyright Fortress Arc. I lost my superpowers at 11. Boobs are kryptonite. I guess so. Also, calibrating. Thank you for the 50 sec. The 50 secs. I appreciate them. I don't know what that translates to, but I appreciate the dono. Super chat. I guess he's saying if your parents are gay, you can't be Catholic, which is just not true.
Are in bed. saying they want to start a family together. She's explaining this to Spider Devil. Currently, for some reason, Kurt is a variant of Spider-Man. He's Spider-Man, like he's running around calling himself Spider-Man. He's got his own.
Yeah, they've been having like a huge Spider-Man comic event for a while now.
I guess it's actually pretty good. I haven't read it. But in this X-Men Blue Origins issue, she tells a story about how her and Destiny are now the father and mother of Nightcrawler. I don't know if they have that picture. There was a picture on Twitter of them holding a baby, and I don't see that one.
Maybe I misspoke about Wolverine being Jewish, but I really hate that I typed in Wolverine Jewish, and the number one response was from Quora, is Wolverine Jewish? No, and he's definitely not circumcised. Why do you know that? And why? What? Fuck everything.
Maybe that one was AI generated. I don't know. But that is the story of Nightcrawler. Not this or the Azazel one. It's just ridiculous what they're doing. And it's even more...
Very important X-Men.
There's even more of this going on over at DC. Like, okay, so Wes from Thinking Critical, great channel, posted this. I don't know who Dan Perrin is, but he landed on my never buy list in record time. This is John Kent, Superman, doing nude selfies. I'm guessing he's sending nude selfies to Jay, his K-pop boyfriend. And then I said, well, here's a random panel from Kaiju number 8. Marvel and DC Comics are dead. This is a random thing. For $2, you can get the Shonen Jump app and read everything. It's a great deal. This is why they're taking over the market. Boys are still reading comics. Guess what they're reading? They're reading this. Disney has lost it. Marvel has lost it. Nobody wanted this retcon, except for the people at Marvel, because they don't give a shit about profits. They don't care.
I don't know. I think it's pretty cool. If somebody floated that idea by me, I'd be like, hell yeah, let's do it. Also, like, Mystique is just like one of the gayest X-Men, right? Can we just agree on that? Like, Mystique is just like very queer coded. And Storm, true.
Care about making money. They don't care.
Basically, all of the X-Men except Cyclops.
In the comic book industry, nothing. What they want is for two women to have a baby together, and that's exactly what's happening here. Two women just had a baby.
Yeah, there's no way women would ever have babies together in the real world, like through adoption, surrogacy, trans women and cis women being together. There's no way gays could have babies.
Baby. Mystique went from being the mother of Nightcrawler to becoming the father of Nightcrawler. Beautiful. Well done, Marvel. Well done.
Well, I'm guessing that technically Azazel is still sort of the father, since in the story Mystique transforms into Azazel. I guess because Destiny is kind of into that? I don't know. I don't know. Lesbian is when no baby. True.
You've managed to kill your sales even more.
God, the amount of you in the comments right now talking about Wolverine's foreskin healing. God, we've gone too far. This is degeneracy.
And the real victims in this are comic book shops, because they're stuck with all this inventory and no one's buying it, and it's sad. Interest in new comic books is down big time, and they did this all to themselves. So what are your thoughts on this? I'd like to hear from you guys in the comments. Also, if you would, please like, subscribe, share the video. Make sure you're still subscribed, hit that notification bell. Check out my Rumble and Locals.
I don't know. I don't know my rear end. I don't know. God. All right, I just had to get that out of my system. I needed to hear his argument for why it's terrible, and I love that his basic argument is the woke people at Marvel are making gay X-Men, and nobody wants gay X-Men. Nobody wants gay Superboy. Which I don't think is true. I think people are pretty okay with the gays, generally speaking. The X-Men were always gay. Yeah, the X-Men were always coded as like struggle for like civil rights for like oppressed minorities. Yeah. My problem is that I encourage the horny posters in this stream, and then I disclaim responsibility for it. Fair. Yeah, I know it's your typical go woke, go broke rant, but I just needed to know the argument against women, a shapeshifter of all people, fathering a child. How, like, I don't understand the rejection of that idea just on the fantasy lore grounds, you know? God. All right. Folks, time to get serious. We're gonna talk about the situation in Gaza and the situation in the occupied West Bank and Jerusalem. All right, not necessarily in that order, but also this jacket is so cute and cool. Just gonna say that before we go in. I'm not gonna be saying it during the serious stuff. So no more foreskin discourse, please no. My problem is, why did she impregnate Destiny when she could have had Vosh? Well, clearly because Mystique can't transform into a horse. And folks, consider dropping some subs or donos because you guys help make this show possible. It's okay. It's okay, that other Ted. It's the deep lore. No, Vosh wants to be the horse. Well, that's going to be a problem then. Still going to be a problem, just reversed. Anyway. So we have to talk a little bit about... I think we're going to start with the gunmen in Jerusalem. Then we're going to move on to Gaza and the West Bank. All right. So, a few days ago, on November 30th, 2 Hamas gunmen opened fire in Jerusalem, and they injured several people, killed 3. They were at a bus stop during rush hour, and it came on the 7th day of the truce between Hamas and Israel. And this was not great overall for the implications of it. But there was something interesting and horrific that happened during it, besides just the opening fire during rush hour situation. One of the people who was an off-duty an off-duty cop or soldier, I don't exactly know which, he was able to stop one of the shooters, right? He was armed, shot him, and there's now a video going around of this man who, again, had just stopped two Hamas agents in Jerusalem. He throws down his weapon and puts his hands up, and IDF troops show up and kill him. So it's a 40-second long video, and it is hard to watch. But it's very interesting to me because in a lot of the press around this, he's being labeled as the 4th victim of the Jerusalem terror attack. which is there's something deeply sick about it. The fourth victim of today's Jerusalem terror attack was mistakenly shot by the IDF, who mistook him for the terrorist and later succumbed to his wounds. He's been named as 37-year-old Yuval Doron Castleman. May his memory forever be a blessing. And this user responds, Doron took off his coat, kneeled down, had his hands in the air, threw away his pistol, begged in perfect Hebrew not to be shot, and he wasn't accidentally shot. He was summarily executed. Don't believe me? Watch. So this is a trigger warning on this one. It is it's horrific.
רפאל, הוא מת, הוא נפל, הוא מת.
They just execute him and let him bleed out. And I need to, like, he died later from his injuries, but like, it is something we need to talk about here. Is that not just the brutality of the IDF doesn't just apply to like Gazans or Palestinians in the West Bank. It applies at home too. And I wanted to show that to you guys specifically to hammer home the point that the IDF just is this fascistic force. You know, that they don't care about the facts. You know, these soldiers are responding to a mass shooting incident. They don't care to find out if this guy was involved in it or not. They just think, oh, he looks Palestinian. He looks wrong. So we're just going to shoot him, even though he's on the ground, hands up, even though he's thrown away his pistol and his jacket. They know there's nothing else on him. He's shouting at them, you know, don't shoot me. I'm in Hebrew. Don't shoot me. Check my papers. Check my papers. And Sophie, that's the thing, right? One of the things, and I don't, you know, dip into Chapo Trap House as often as I used to, but like one of the things Matt Christman would say would be, you know, fascism is kind of colonialism brought home, right? The IDF and their policing of Gaza, is inevitably something that is going to be brought back and used against the people within Israel, against Jewish people in Israel. Like this is not just an isolated thing. Like, part of what everyone needs to understand is that the violence being enacted upon Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank is inevitably going to shift in some form or fashion domestically to suppress protests, perhaps to suppress judicial reforms. Again, that's been one of the problems plaguing Netanyahu's bid for power here, is that Jewish Israelis were turning up and protesting against his governmental overreach to essentially set himself up as a dictator. Well, it becomes a lot easier to squash those protests if you have a much more militarized police response. This is what we are seeing happen in Jerusalem, and frankly across Israel. Yeah, like I mean, just like a week or so ago, I showed you guys footage of Orthodox Jews protesting in favor of Palestinian rights, and like cops just began sucker punching them. Like this is the colonialism being brought home. Dissent will be punished. Disrespect of the law enforcer will be met with severe violence. Or systemic abuse, This is an ongoing threat to not just Palestinians, but Israelis as well, to everyone in this region. The radicalization of the IDF and of Israel and its body politic inevitably is going to hurt Israelis. And it's so frustrating. It's so frustrating because people in the United States especially pretend that, oh, it's anti-Semitic to criticize the Israeli state. It's anti-Semitic to criticize the Israeli state. When the Israeli state is overwhelmingly the one inflicting suffering right now upon Israelis. And I mean, like, this was just introduced today. A new House resolution, this is according to Ryan Grimm, which may be voted on as early as tonight, clearly and firmly states that anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. This comes after a previous revolution hinting at that claim, but did not fully state it. So now Congress wants to leave no question. But there's an additional trap. Anyone who votes against this resolution will be said to have voted against condemning anti-Semitism. Criticizing the policy of the state of Israel to colonize the surrounding neighbors is now considered anti-Semitic. Criticizing the Israeli state's colonial activity is being lumped in with hating an entire ethnic religious group. This is like saying being against Iran expanding its sphere of influence is Islamophobic. Like just to flip this a little bit, this is like saying Iran having doing activities that expand its sphere of influence means you hate all Muslims. But it's not Palestinians. It's not Palestinians who killed Doron. That was the IDF. It's not Palestinians who are killing over 15,000 other Palestinians. It's the IDF. Palestinians haven't ethnically cleansed the Gaza Strip. That's the IDF's Zionist policies. And inevitably, those Zionist policies that are focused outward are going to be turned inward. And we're seeing kind of the first flickerings of that, but it's going to become more and more common. I want to make it clear that the far-right Republicans that support this don't give a fuck about Jews or anti-Semitism. The far-right has been pushing anti-Semitic conspiracy theories for decades, and don't forget that Arabs are also a Semitic people. True, Sophie. But that's the thing, right? Like, even when I try to make the argument and try to make it clear that having this colonial state in the Middle East that is violently trying to expand itself, that is violently trying to ethnically cleanse the areas it controls, when it is violently trying to genocide an undesirable minority. That is ultimately going to be bad for the people in Israel too, for the Israelis who are recognized by the state. All of these policies are ultimately going to be bad for Israelis, but American conservatives don't care about that, because what they care about is fulfilling ancient prophecy so that all of these people get wiped out anyway. That's what that's fundamentally what they care about, because that's what their electorate cares about. I just, the audacity here to say that criticizing the policy of a state is synonymous with hating an ethnic religious group is deeply, deeply offensive to me. It's like people saying, oh yeah, you know, they only hate America because America's a Christian nation, so that they just hate all Christians. Like, what? No. Having a critique against the American government doesn't mean you hate all Americans. It is shocking how much death cult mentalities have over all of this discourse. All right. Moving on, we're gonna give some updates on the Gaza Strip, so prepare yourselves. So, with the breaking of the truce between Israel and Hamas, the breaking of the temporary ceasefire, all hell has kind of broken loose on all of Gaza. It seems as if the attack by two Palestinians during rush hour in Jerusalem, I believe on November 30th, has essentially greenlit the IDF to ignore any and all safe zones that had previously been established or alluded to in their propaganda. The conflict has now expanded not just to focus on northern Gaza, but they are now focusing on central and southern Gaza. And it is horrific. In the past 24 hours, over 700 Palestinians have died. I mean, like when the New York Post starts running these stories, hell on earth, Israel launches 10,000th airstrike in Gaza. 700 people reported killed in the last 24 hours. And again, those 700 people are Palestinians. 700 Palestinians killed between December 2nd and December 3rd. Again, half of whom are children. I mean, the New York Post is an absolute rag, but the fact that the New York Post is reporting this, I'm not to go into another segment here, but like the fact that the Wall Street Journal is running stories about Palestinians needing to flee the West Bank because of Israeli ethnic cleansing is insane. The fact that these stories are penetrating this far into predominantly conservative outlets is telling you that this has gotten so far beyond what the United States expected. Israel pressing a ground offensive in southern Gaza. Airstrikes are intensifying. So if some of you can recall, there was prior to the ceasefire, the Israeli military, the IDF, had continually said, Al-Shifa Hospital, that's where the command center is, that's where it is, we know that for certain, etc., etc., etc. Then we learned that they were saying that because the Israelis built the basement of the Al-Shifa medical center and also just assumed that Hamas would be operating out of it. They wound up raiding the hospital, found precious little, and didn't actually accomplish obstructing Hamas at all. Because again, Hamas's leadership is in Turkey, in Qatar. Like they're not in the Gaza Strip. And not only that, but like they leveled almost the entirety of Gaza City. And I think the number right now is that there's an estimated like 80 to 85% of all residential buildings have been destroyed by the IDF. They're trying to get that number up to 100%. And they told all of the refugees from Gaza City, go to Khan Yunis, you will be safe in Khan Yunis. Well, as soon as they went into Al-Shifa and found Jack All, they started saying, well, the other Hamas command center is in Khan Yunis. They're all based up in Khan Yunis. Well, now that the ceasefire is done, sure enough, Israel is marching its entire forces down into southern Gaza in order to attack Khan Yunis. There are no safe zones anymore and again, I use safe zones with air quotes, because they weren't really that safe in the first place. Israel was still bombing them prior to this, but now they're stepping up those bombing campaigns. They're targeting the refugees in order to facilitate their ethnic cleansing campaign. And if you listen to American media, you'd be forgiven to kind of like believing that, oh, well, they're being tactical. They're being tactical with their strikes. They're only attacking Hamas buildings. That's not it at all. They are eliminating any place that these people could potentially return to. Because the entire point of this campaign is to rid Israel of its Palestinian problem. How to do that was the Palestinian question. Because keep in mind, Palestinians can't leave. There's no border that is open to them right now. They can't go into Egypt. They can't go into Israel. Those are the only two borders that they have access to. There's only one border crossing to get into Egypt. There are, I think, 6 or 7 to get into Israel. All of them are closed. All of them are closed. The Washington Post today, Israel's military pushes into southern Gaza as danger for civilians mounts. Yeah, because there's nowhere for them to go. They are effectively cornered in southern Gaza. Dozens of Israeli military vehicles crossed into southern Gaza, new satellite imagery showed Monday, signaling the long-expected beginning of a new phase of Israel's war against Hamas in the densely populated enclave. Honestly, I don't know that they have even successfully killed more than a handful of Hamas fighters. Most of the people who are dying in the Gaza Strip are civilians. Considering I just got news that a Zionist megadonor is making threats at my pro-Palestinian congressperson just because he called for a ceasefire, the megadonor is making obscene demands from the rest of the party to cut off my congressperson. It's bad. Well, no, that's why people like John Fetterman are folding. Like they're made out of wet paper. That's why they're doing like these weird stunts. They're folding because wealthy donors and wealthy super PACs are threatening them with money. They're being threatened by these large donors who are more than willing to fund a pro-Israel Republican. You know? And money talks to a lot of these people in positions of political power because they can't fund their own campaigns. Like, all of the efforts to potentially curb this violence are just not coming to any successful conclusion, largely because of the stranglehold the Israeli state has constructed for itself on the American political apparatus. And yes, Charlie, exactly. The IDF exports the, oppressive occupation techniques that they hone in Gaza and the West Bank. They export them. They export those techniques to America. America pays the IDF to train American cops. Israel's colonialism doesn't just come home in Israel, it also comes home in the United States. A focal point of the operations Monday was Gaza's Salah al-Din Road, which Israel had previously designated as an evacuation route for civilians fleeing from the north to the south. The IDF, for the first time, announced Monday that a segment of the road north of Khan Yunis was a battlefield and that residents should no longer approach it. The IDF identified bypass roads it said residents should travel on instead, adding to the thicket of evacuation orders Israel has issued in recent days that it says are aimed at reducing civilian casualties. But aid groups have warned the directives are becoming impossible to navigate, while Palestinians in Gaza say the guidance is of little use in a place where most everywhere is filled with peril. Late on Monday, the Palestine Red Crescent Society said it had lost contact with its medical teams in Gaza after the main telephone and internet provider, Paltel, said all communication services were cut. The level of human suffering is intolerable. It is unacceptable that civilians have no safe place to go in Gaza. With a military siege in place, there is no adequate humanitarian response currently possible. This is from the International Committee of the Red Cross. So the communications blackout has rolled all the way over southern Gaza. It's becoming impossible to communicate with people there. Yeah, when they say, the Biden administration has apparently behind closed doors been essentially begging the Israeli government to be more surgical and tactical with its strikes. Netanyahu effectively went on in like some recorded behind closed doors meetings, apparently basically bragged to his Likud colleagues that he could effectively ignore anything the United States was saying. And they're not going to be more surgical with their strikes. That's just, it's clearly not happening. Especially given the loss of life we've seen in the last couple days. And well, yeah, exactly. That's just the thing Mithril missed. The Israeli government, and I've been saying this since the beginning, the Israeli government is going to kill men, women, and children, regardless of whether they're combatants, and then just classify them after the fact as combatants. And I mean, I don't know how to convince people who are set against this that this is or set in favor of this type of military intervention that has been going on. I don't know how to convince them that this is just wrong on every conceivable level. I mean, this is yesterday. Israel says its ground forces are operating across all of Gaza. Earlier, the Jabalia refugee camp in the north was hit, with initial reports saying tens of people were killed and at least one residential block destroyed. About 300 people were reported to be sheltering in the vicinity of the latest strike. I mean, it's just... I mean, here's a map. They're moving down. There's really no further southern city that people can go to except for Rafah. But I mean, it's... I think this clip from Majority Report that Matt Leck posted on Twitter says a lot.
I found it very difficult to resurrect alliances it had at the beginning with social democratic forces, with democratic forces, not to mention movement on the left. The reality on the ground was too evident for people with a modicum of decency or belief in human rights and justice to say, I'm a supporter of Israel today. Israelis, by the way, live under the illusion that what happened in the 7th of October erased it all. It's amazing to read the Israeli analysis here. They really believe that they are absolved from everything they have done in the past, and they have an absolution for what they're doing now, and the whole discourse about Israel is going to change. No more colonialism, no more settler colonialism, no more apartheid like Amnesty International suggested. They really believe that it almost was a painful, horrific event that enables Israel to fight more successfully the moral battle. Of course, they're totally wrong.
Yeah, I mean, like, what we're seeing right now is essentially Netanyahu acting upon, like, some of the worst retaliatory instincts. We're seeing the IDF being commanded by the same instincts that led a lot of people post 9/11 in the United States to just be like, oh yeah, we should just glass the Middle East. Yeah, just nuke them. Except in this case, like, the IDF is actually acting upon that. They're acting upon the impulse to just kill all of them. Like, and not to say that the United States reacted well. Like, we occupied Afghanistan for 20 years. We killed hundreds of thousands of civilians. But, like, we're seeing a systemic elimination of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip and in the West Bank. It is... I mean, it really does feel like looking at, like, an alternative history where the United States adopted a genocidal stance towards the entirety of the Middle East. So basically, they murdered a bunch of civilians. Then when the civilians struck back, they went, see, we were right all along. They're just animals. I mean, kind of Snugin, but it's more complicated than that, right? Like, it's not just Israel killed a bunch of people during the occupation and then, like, see, they're just animals. Because that would imply, like, the occupation of, like, the Gaza Strip and the West Bank was designed to not bring about the violent reaction. Because we know that Netanyahu deliberately set up the IDF in the occupation in order to provoke such violent outbursts, because it serves him politically. This is why, again, he argued in favor of funding Hamas in order to facilitate a future in which no Palestinian state is possible. So it's not even it's even worse. It's deliberately creating conditions known to cause a violent outburst. Members of the IDF have known for years that the situation in the Gaza Strip is unsustainable, that it will lead to radicalization, that it will lead to violence, and yet the politicians in charge, Likud, have facilitated that at every turn in order to achieve this exact outcome. This is the culmination, not exactly the way Netanyahu wanted it, mind you, but this is the culmination of a long-term plan. It is a long-term plan that plays into their settler colonial narrative. That they're civilizing the area. From the savages. Like it's almost a repurposing of the manifest destiny in America. And I just have to, Ryan Grimm, just finding amazing stories here. This is from just a couple days ago. And I can't believe this is real, but this is the timeline we live in. Ryan Grimm. According to the Israeli press, Netanyahu has instructed Ron Dermer, his Minister of Strategic Planning and a very close aide, to explore ways to thin out the Gaza population, along with the renewed proposal to push them through the Rafah crossing into Egypt. The English translation of the report adds, "The sea is open to Gazans. At its will, Israel opens the sea crossing and enables a mass escape to European and African countries." And this is the translated text. The Prime Minister's plan for the citizens of the Gaza Strip, the direction out. The emergency government broadcasts uniformity regarding the resumption of fighting, but regarding the day after, the story is different. Besides the issue of control of the Strip, a plan formulated by Ron Dermer at Netanyahu's request, which examines ways to thin the population in Gaza to a minimum, in addition to the issue of control of the Strip, is also expected to cause controversy, considers it an unrealistic fantasy. So the plan at the highest levels of the Netanyahu government is to kill so many Palestinians that the remainder are more palatable for Egypt and European and African nations to accept as refugees. That's their plan. That is their final solution to the Palestinian question. Simply kill them until there are so few of them that they can be safely exported. Like they're fucking commodities. Like they're cattle being liquidated for slaughter. I mean, like it, and again, I would have so much more doubt about the veracity of this if it didn't come courtesy of Ryan Grimm, who is one of the best reporters I know working today. Like, he's not perfect, but he's incredibly good at what he does. No, that's why I made that analogy, Gamergy. Like, they're literally talking about thinning the herd. There are too many of them in the ranch. It is unspeakably evil what Israel is doing to the Palestinian people right now. They call it mowing the lawn. I would not, I haven't encountered that phrasing in my coverage yet, but it would not surprise me. Yeah, no. Yep. You can just Google mowing the lawn Israel. Mowing the grass is a metaphor used to describe the strategy of Israel against Palestinian militants in the Gaza Strip. Except that it's been expanded from just militants to all Palestinians. Like, and reporting on this in the Washington Post as far back as 2021, Just right off the bat, it's their go-to tactic. That's what they call it. I mean, like, talk about dehumanizing your opponents. Like, they. I mean, even in the most dehumanizing language I've ever heard, people are still compared to like animals or insects or something. I have never heard people referred to as grass or weeds before. Absolutely disgusting. This article is insane, by the way.
I found that I had become white and decided to do something about it.
Peluvius, thank you very much for getting a tier 1 sub. I appreciate it. Just like mowing your front lawn, this is constant hard work. David M. Weinberg of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security wrote for the Jerusalem Post this week, if you fail to do so, weeds grow wild and snakes begin to slither it around in the brush. Wow. Zahava Galon, a former lawmaker with the leftist Meretz party, wrote for Haaretz that the strategy results in a perpetual war that forgets human beings are also able to talk, not only to carry a club. I mean, like, they're. I feel like this 2021 article is just incredibly prescient to what we've been seeing and what this strategy is. I think the powers that be in Israel realize that they can't mow the lawn forever. It is absolutely genocidal language. It is extraordinarily genocidal language. I mean, the fact that you have Netanyahu literally talking about Palestinians as if they're cattle, talking about needing to thin them out, which is just mass slaughter, by the way. To clarify, we're talking about mass slaughter of human beings. Genocide. It is genocide. You have the leader of the country calling for the mass slaughter of Palestinians. God. And again, just to revisit this one, this is literally like, oh, you can't get into Egypt. Well, just get on a boat and sail across the Mediterranean until you find some place that will take you. Otherwise, we'll kill you here. Dermer was Netanyahu's longtime Israeli ambassador to the United States and is friendly with many members of Congress. Ooh, who'd have thought? Let's read this entire article, shall we? Prime Minister's plan for the citizens of the Gaza Strip, the direction out. The emergency government broadcasts uniformity regarding the resumption of fighting, but regarding the day after, the story is different. Besides the issue of control of the Strip, a plan drawn up by Ron Dermer at Netanyahu's request, which examines ways to thin out the Palestinian population in Gaza to a minimum, is also expected to cause controversy. Because it's a controversial plan to genocide them. For the Prime Minister, this is a strategic goal. The top of the security considers it an unrealistic fantasy. And again, this is Google translated, so it's gonna have some weird phrasing in it. Throughout the days of the ceasefire in the fighting in Gaza, the war cabinet ministers, and in fact all the government ministers, made sure to emphasize that it was a temporary ceasefire. They made it clear not only to the citizens of Israel, but also the world leaders, led by President Joe Biden. October 7th was a defining event, a moment when an entire nation was humiliated and received a painful blow. Even at a time when the campaign captains are instructing the IDF to lay siege to the fire, it is important for them to broadcast a united front and make it clear that the fire will return again. This principle is also preserved in the closed rooms of the security consultations, in the limited and extensive cabinet. It seems that for fear of things getting out, even to themselves, the senior officials do not dare to say anything. And yet, despite the uniform front and the consistent line, it is possible to recognize in the nuances the difference between the leaders of the war. Naturally, the thin cracks in the first act will lead to political turmoil in the latter. And if already at the stage of conducting the war there are different opinions, then in the question of the day after, the significant differences between the main players are already evident. When they keep saying the day after, they're talking about the end, like what will this look like when the war is done, essentially. The issue of the day after is one of the most sensitive today, and dealing with it does not take place in any official forum, but only in internal consultations. If there is a significant point of disagreement with the Biden administration on the Gaza issue, then it concerns this question. You know, the Palestinian question. As for the other things, you can manipulate. To introduce humanitarian aid at the request of the American president and even fuel. Even the new demand not to cause harm to the displaced people in the southern Gaza Strip when the IDF starts operating there can be answered with a non-binding statement that, we will try. Jesus Christ. But bringing Abu Mazen into Gaza to replace the IDF forces on the ground is a completely different story. Benny Gantz and Gadi Eisenkot would gladly do it. Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant less so. The common thing is that they all convey a message that Israel has no intention of controlling the territory by itself from a civilian point of view. Gallant means in all seriousness. As for Netanyahu, not sure. His clear statements that an authority that supports terrorism, that transfers salaries to terrorists and educates that's very rich considering he funded Hamas specifically to fund the terrorists, and educates its children to incite against Jews, will not control Gaza, will not allow the Ramallah gang to enter Gaza. There is no other substitute. Hence, the IDF will continue to control the Strip, military and civilian, at least in the foreseeable future. Another program is added to this. Most of the cabinet ministers do not know about her. Not even the ministers of the war cabinet. It is not discussed in these forums due to its obvious explosiveness, thinning the population of Gaza to the minimum possible. Biden is strongly opposed, and so is the entire international community. Gallant, the chief of staff, and the top of the IDF claim that there is no such possibility. But Netanyahu sees this as a strategic goal. He even tasked his confidant in the war cabinet, Minister Ron Dermer, to formulate a staff work on the matter. This is a plan that will bypass the American resistance without a confrontation, the Egyptians determined resistance without them starting to shoot refugees who will enter their territory through the Philadelphia axis. I'm going to guess that means that's the Rafah border crossing. And the general global resistance will arise when the first Gazans leave their home and migrate to another place. The phenomenon of refugees in war zones is an accepted thing. Tens of millions of refugees have left war zones across the globe in just the last decade. Just real quick, I want to pause to clarify here that the argument that is being made is essentially that Netanyahu believes that the IDF will need to occupy and control and effectively annex the Gaza Strip when all of this is done, right? And he believes that part of the issue is that there will be more international backlash the larger the group of refugees that need to be taken in is. So in order to reduce that international backlash, the solution that they have is just kill them until there are so few that they provoke no international backlash, which is insane to me, dude. I don't think that will work, but that is the plan Netanyahu seems to be going with. From Syria to Ukraine, all of them were found to have addresses in the countries that agreed to accept them as a humanitarian gesture. So why would Gaza be different? It is not about a transfer, but about releasing the stranglehold on the Gaza borders. Although the crossings to Israel will remain sealed, there are other options. Rafah is one of them, despite Egypt's strong opposition. This passage at certain times was breached and completely open. Even today, there is an underground passage between Rafah in Gaza and the Egyptian one in the dimensions of a freeway. I citation fucking needed on this one. Oh, it's okay if Egypt keeps the border closed. There's a secret underground freeway that they can all use. Seems to be ultimate fantasy to me, without any type of citation. The sea is also open to the Gazans. At its will, Israel opens the sea crossing and enables a mass escape to European and African countries. In the context of encouraging Gaza immigration, the differences between the members of the government are huge. While Smotrich, who is, by the way, horrific, Smotrich is like one of the most evil men currently in power in Israel. Ben Gabir and quite a few Likud ministers see this as a necessity. Others, such as Gallant, Gantz, and Eisenkot, see it as something between an unrealistic fantasy and a despicable and immoral plan, which is insane to me. But, like, the majority of Likud is in favor of mass slaughtering Palestinians. When the Likud ministers and others are asked if they are certain that after the ceasefire the fighting will resume, they all reply that there is no public mandate for any elected official to end the war now. The public is on fire, they say. The soldiers inside are at the peak of motivation. There's no way to stop it now. Oh, well, there's just no way to stop it, so might as well continue killing civilians. There's no more bleak answer than this. A leader should not only listen to the whisper of the public's heart, but should be one whose heart is burning within him regardless of the surrounding mood. To feel this immense humiliation, the unimaginable pain, and the feeling of revenge, the necessity to make amends and raising one's head, these feelings should flow through his veins, be pumped into his lungs with each and every breath from the moment he gets up in the morning until the sleepless nights of the night. The impression is that neither Netanyahu nor Gallant nor Gantz are in this place. What wonder, then, that they are suspected from the first moment that all they are interested in is looking for a convenient nearby exit point, a picture of victory instead of victory, and Samos instead of a decision. So they're just admitting they've lost control of their own bloodlust? Kind of, yeah. I mean, this article is insane. God. We do that. All right. Before voting in favor of the hostage deal in the government, Smotrich asked to speak with Netanyahu privately. I say this as clearly as there is. I made it clear to him, we cannot stay one moment in the government if the war does not resume. Netanyahu replied to Smotrich that he thinks, like him, that fighting should be resumed. The minister of France was not impressed and clarified that his party will not be able to stay in any case and in any situation if the fire is not renewed. Only after the point was clear did he sit down and vote in favor. From now on, everything by the book. 2 weeks after the beginning of the school year, the agreement between the Ministry of Finance and the teachers' organization was signed, and the large strike in high schools was stopped. The vacation schedule... What? Did we just, like, weirdly hop into another article? Ministry of Finance... Teachers... okay. So basically the Minister of Finance doesn't like big change, and they're trying to reform education. They were in a tiff with the teachers. After a campaign of propaganda and sweeping support during it from major media outlets, Benny Gantz from the coalition also announced that he would not agree to approve a budget that does not include the cancellation of coalition funds. Wait. No, this seems... I'm very confused. Did we like quantum leap into a new article? Where's the article from again? It's from israelhayom.co.il. Again, directed to it by Ryan Grimm here. Fuck, dude. Okay, so I think what this is talking about, and again, this is difficult for me to parse because of the translation. I think basically the Minister of Finance is... Okay, yeah, Minister of Finance is Bezalel Smotrich. So Smotrich is the Minister of Finance. And basically, they used a lot of their campaign funds to negotiate with the education and teachers and basically push through a bunch of their money to ultra-Orthodox organizations. And that means that they basically have no funds left to enable them to really do much else. No more coalition funds. Everything goes inside the plot of the book. Want to trim? No problem, but let it be business. There are hundreds of unnecessary wartime budget items that are not in the coalition funds. The plan that is being formed for 2024 does not answer only to the title of cuts for the purpose of the war expense or the return of the economy to function. That is, it seems a revenge campaign. The opposition and the media attack the coalition funds because they all reflect the agenda of the right-wing coalition. So it seems to be that more left-leaning political parties are attacking Likud not on the monstrosity of their war against innocent Palestinians, which, you know, are primarily the ones bearing the brunt of the violence. But because the budget, they're upset over the budget going towards this. Cool. And because they're conservative, of course they're willing to like cut a bunch of things throughout Israel in order to fund the war. Yeah. The opposition and the media attack the coalition funds because they all reflect the agenda of the right-wing coalition. From the ultra-Orthodox through the settlements to the Torah cores. In the next budget, many funds that the right-wing camp is less interested in will be cut, especially culture, academia, and media. The planned cuts will be sharp. She will cut the meat. Cultural institutions, secular ones, will suffer, according to the plan, a dramatic cut. The Treasury will demand from the budgeted universities the closure or reduction of entire faculties, those that don't help the economy during the war. Basically, this is their opportunity, through these cuts, to consolidate power behind their fascistic regime. The fight will be stubborn. Senior officials in the coalition are hot on the matter and do not intend to give up. After the war with Hamas, the war over the resources of the Israeli public will return when it is clear to everyone this time who started it. As part of the campaign to cut coalition funds and unnecessary offices, Yitzhak Wasserlauf's office, the Negev, the Galilee, and the National Defense, was supposed to undergo a drastic cut of more than 90%. Holy shit. Netanyahu, Smotrich, and the Treasury officials thought this would go easily for them, as happened with the other ministries whose budgets were diverted in the last month for the needs of the war, the evacuees, and the families of the kidnapped. They were wrong. When Wasserloff learned of this on Sunday close to midnight, he called the chairman of the local authorities, Chaim Bibbs, the head of the Development Cities Forum, Benny Beitin, the chairman of the regional councils, Shea Hajjaj, and the chairman of the conflict line authorities, Moshe Davidovich, and informed them of the finance plans that were exposed to his eyes. More than that was not needed. Bibbs and Beaton decided to mobilize all the mayors and began to sign them all in the wee hours of the night on a call to stop the cuts in the office that helped the local authorities more than any other office since the outbreak of the war. Already from the first week, Wasserloff poured a lot of money into the associations and projects for the affected populations and stayed in the field when the rest of the ministers were still in their air-conditioned offices, trying to digest the magnitude of the event. While the signatures were being piled up and sent directly to the Ministry of Finance, Wasserloff was summoned to a hurried consultation with the heads of the Treasury. When the negotiations ended, there were 121 signatures on the table. Arachnid, thank you for subscribing. Including Tel Aviv Mayor Ron Holdai. The Treasury only begged him to calm down the angry mayors. The planned cut would have left the ministry with a budget of NIS 4 million. 3 hours later, it ended up close to 200 million. Jesus. I mean, like, this is right. What we're reading here is a fascistic power grab predicated on, oh, we need those resources for wartime. We need those resources for wartime. And we need those resources for wartime specifically so we can thin out the Palestinians so that other nations can take them and then we can annex the territories. Like that's what this article is about. I don't see how Netanyahu feels safe talking like this and just walking around in public. Because the majority of his political coalition agrees with him. Even if someone were to take Netanyahu out, even if that were to happen hypothetically, there is nothing that anyone could do to stop one of his ideological clones from being put in place. You know, like like the Minister of Finance, for example, moving up. I mean, like, the majority of Likud, the majority of Likud's politicians agree with Netanyahu. There's just nothing. There's nothing to do there. It's like they think they're playing a video game like Civilization and not human lives, just drive them out and we annex the land. Yeah, I mean, it's telling that, again, half this article was about the finance of the war and how most people within Israel are focused on that. And it's just like, what we're seeing there is Netanyahu and Likud consolidating power around themselves in the military when they're on the verge of trying to pass judicial reforms that will eliminate effectively any type of democratic balance of power in their state apparatus. Do you think that after they get rid of Palestinians, they would start targeting the Jewish population who aren't the right kind? I mean, Zakina, yeah, there are already laws on the books within Israel proper that target specifically like Arab Israelis. Like, there are already laws in place that would do this. I would expect like an escalation of those laws. Absolutely horrifying. Okay, and we also need to talk quickly about West Bank, the occupied West Bank. Now, you guys know, because I've been doing stories on the occupied West Bank for a while now, that essentially what happens is in the occupied West Bank, settlers illegally enter the occupied West Bank territory. They create like an outpost of some kind, and then over time, they expand that outpost into like a small town to a city, and their presence is backed up by the IDF. So if Israeli settlers show up at your farm and you're a Palestinian, the IDF does not back up your right to exist there. They don't respond to your 911 calls. Your police or emergency calls. They respond specifically to settler matters. And if settlers show up to try and like harass you or burn your house down, and you try to resist them and you're a Palestinian, the IDF will arrest you or kill you, or the settlers will kill you. So basically what has wound up happening is just an ongoing, slow-rolling terror campaign against Palestinians in the West Bank. And I know I showed this earlier in a different segment, but I'm going to show it again, and we're going to go over it a little bit. But the fact that you are getting these stories now in the Wall Street Journal, one of the most conservative like outlets in America, is insane. Palestinians in West Bank flee after settler violence. We were forced to leave. Since the start of the war, around 1,000 Palestinians living in the West Bank have left their homes. And again, this story starts out in Zanuta, which is a place that has just been a constant barrage for Israeli settlers to try and force entire villages to flee. And in a rare showing of, I guess, backbone, the Biden administration is at the very least imposing a visa ban on Israeli settlers. So I don't exactly know how this would ever be enforceable, but the fact that it even is being discussed is somewhat heartening. Anthony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, in his meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, and his war cabinet have let them know the United States will take its own action against the undisclosed number of individuals. So, I guess using American intelligence, they would compile a list of settler colonial extremists who would not be allowed into the United States. Which is good, I suppose, because again, a not insignificant number of Israeli settlers are also American citizens. You know, there's that famous video of the guy from Brooklyn stealing a Palestinian's house, saying, "Well, if I don't do it, someone else is going to steal your house. Sucks to suck." It's just insane. Asked for a response, an Israeli government spokesperson, Ilon Levy, said he had no comment on the matter, but said that Israel firmly condemned any vigilantism or hooliganism or attempts by individuals to take the law into their own hands. And yet, for the last, I don't know, several decades, we've seen exactly this. I mean, for fuck's sake, I talked on stream about the wedding of hate, where like Israeli settlers were stabbing pictures of dead Palestinian children who had their families, or who had themselves like burned alive. Like this hatred goes so deep, and the violence goes so deep. I like the idea that like the IDF takes these matters very seriously. We've seen the videos from occupied West Bank, from Israelis in the occupied West Bank. We've seen the videos. Like that evidence is out there. You can't just pretend, oh, you know, we strongly condemn it. Often the IDF are participating in it, my guy. And just as kind of a final nail on this, I know that there are a lot of conservatives out there, and a lot of conservative Christians out there, who tend to not care about Palestinians because they just kind of lump them all in as, oh, they're Muslims. They're so different from you and I. You know, they'd see a gay person and just behead them instantly. You know, Palestinians are just basically a different kind of animal from a real human. And just in an attempt to humanize Palestinians, because they are human beings who are suffering and dying. Bethlehem in occupied West Bank will skip Christmas festivities this year. NPR's Osama Khalid asks Palestinian Christians Munther Isaac and Tamar Haddad about their efforts to convince American lawmakers to support a ceasefire in the war between Israel and Hamas. And folks, if you're not a Christian, you'll be forgiven for not knowing this, but Bethlehem is largely considered a very holy location for Christians due to the fact that Christians believe that to be the birthplace of like the Son of God. And the fact that this violence and this occupation are becoming so oppressive that even Christmas will not be celebrated in this city is pretty mind-boggling. And I just wanted to read like kind of this exchange here. This is from Khalid. Munther, I want to start with you. What does it mean to not celebrate Christmas? Why have you all decided to do that? Isaac. Because it's impossible to celebrate when our people are going through a genocide, and we're sending a message, enough, enough. We hope this war ends as soon as possible. Khalid. So no lights, no decorations? Isaac. Nothing. No lights, no decorations. No one feels, no one is in a mood to celebrate. Like, it's an entire city in an occupied area surrounded by hatred and oppressive systems of governance and oppressive military occupation, and they are foregoing the celebration in order to try and drum up some amount of support for Palestinians around the world, to remind other Christians that there are people like them there. Oh yeah, no, Sophie, we went over something like that too. It's Israeli settlers in the West Bank in particular are absolutely unhinged. I know you all sent, and this is Khalid, I know you all sent a letter as well to President Biden. Can you read us just a short excerpt from that letter? I want people to get a sense of what your message was. Isaac. Yeah, well, we were told he got it. Let's hope that's true. The letter was written by representatives, as I said, of the churches in Bethlehem, Orthodox Catholics, Armenian Assyrians, Melkites, and Lutherans. And I have the letter with me. It begins reading. For years, as followers of Jesus, we have called for peace that is based on justice. This land has been crying for peace and justice for 75 years. It is time justice is served. It is time everybody can live with dignity in this land. The Palestinian and Israeli children deserve to live, hope, and dream. Dear Mr. President, There can be no peace and security without justice and equality. There can be no peace and security without equal rights for all. Siege, violence, and war cannot bring peace and security. A comprehensive and just peace is the only hope for Palestinians and Israelis alike. And just here's the end. Here's just the ending exchange, which I think is very illuminating. Khalid, before I let you both go, Munther, you live in Bethlehem, and Tamar, I believe you're in Jerusalem. How has your day-to-day life been for you all there? Tamar Haddad, I mean, in Jerusalem, when the 7th happened, I'd say I haven't left my house for a month and a half because it did not feel safe. Mostly because there are settlers who are attacking Palestinians. And a lot of killings also happened, even in the West Bank. And I'll let Pastor Munther talk about that. Isaac Munther. Yeah, it's been really terrible in the West Bank since October 7th. A massive wave of arrests of Palestinians who've been put in administrative detention without trial, an extensive siege, and checkpoints on every town and in every Palestinian area. Actually, this is something we raised in our visit with policymakers, that while the focus is on Gaza, there has been so much military raiding and so much settler violence in the West Bank, to the extent that it's become really dangerous for us to walk from one place to another. Palestinians are people too, and I feel like I shouldn't have to say that, but unfortunately to a shockingly large number of people, that's a reminder that is deeply needed. And I hope whether you're Jewish, Muslim, Christian, or atheist, whatever, you'll say a few words to your God or the universe to help bring about peace in this region, because we need every bit of help we can get from wherever we can get it. So, heavy stuff today. Folks, I've been going for 3.5 hours. I'm actually a little over time. Please consider hitting the follow button on Twitch, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, hit the like button in the YouTube on the YouTube stream, and consider please dropping some subs or donos, because again, this show is only made possible by viewers like you. Without your support, I can't do it. So that'll be it for today. Talk to you all tomorrow. I'm sorry to leave you on that note, but I gotta go. Already running late as it is. Good night, everybody. I'll send you off to Dylan Burns. How about that? Sorry, LB, I only had time for a 3-hour stream, and you guys got a 3.5-hour stream. Thank you, Gamer G. It's a good outfit. Maybe I'll post some full outfit pics later. Bye.